welcome to The Aggressive Life. You know, as our world changes, it's becoming easier and easier to meet, but more and more difficult to connect. At least that's what Lakshmi Rengarajan thinks, and she's doing something about it. She's a thought leader in both modern dating culture and workplace dynamics. Lakshmi is an expert on human connection, and what she has to say today has the power to actually change your life, change your future by changing your relationships, whether you're dating, married, young, retired, or looking for a job. And I've heard this woman on a podcast that I listen to regularly. It's no secret if you've been around for a while. I really admire the work and the thoughts of Scott Galloway. We share a different worldview. And when he gives an insightful analysis, I find myself regularly going, "Oh man, that's really good." And I hear him talk to people, I go, "I want to talk to that person." So I heard him talk to Lakshmi not too long ago. I said, "Dirt, let's find her."
And we did.
We did find her, and she said yes.
How exciting!
It is exciting. It's wonderful. She was named one of the best guests of 2023 on Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher's Pivot podcast, which I find very, very enlightening. And she's spent her career helping others learn how to connect. She's worked at Match.com as a director of event design. She's developed live events and methods for singles to go from meeting to actually connecting. She was hired by WeWork in a first-of-its-kind role as Director of Workplace Connections. She's a keynote speaker on Workplace Connections. She's a host of Later Today podcast. She's just an all-round impressive woman who I am looking forward to being pushed by today. So welcome to The Aggressive Life, Lakshmi Rengarajan.
You nailed it. Thank you, Brian.
Oh,
wow.
You are welcome. You nailed trying to explain to me how to say your name correctly. So I'm glad I honored you with that. It was worth the time.
Good. I'm glad.
So give us a macro 30,000 view, Lakshmi, of just the state of relationships. What makes relationships so difficult to initiate and keep together in our current culture? Is it harder now than it's ever been? Are we just not as relational as we used to be? Is there just you're the pro on this, so just tell us what's going on.
I don't know if I'm the pro, but I have thought about it a lot, and I'm not afraid to try things myself. And I just want to say, I listened to a bunch of your episodes this weekend. That's why I said, you've been in my ear. And I'm so glad that you're thinking about this from so many different perspectives. I really appreciate that. And I don't think that enough people are doing it. I think they're oversimplifying it. And what I heard in your interviews is I just heard you hitting a lot of different angles, which I hope that we're going to do together today. I don't think there's one answer. I think it's a discussion. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for being so kind. I like it when we have guests who come on and tell me that I'm nice and good. So thank you.
Yes. So you asked a couple of different questions.
Yeah.
So one is that, has it become harder or has it become easier? I think a better way to think about it, a more helpful way to think about it is, I think we're going through a relationship renaissance. And I think if we think about it that way, I think we move further away from despair. I feel like everyone's just so talking about it in this really low energy, sometimes not unrealistic, but unhelpful way. And I think when we think about it, that we're living through a relationship renaissance, I think that we look at it with more curiosity and heart. And then we want to come up with solutions, not just throw in the towel. I see a lot of despair right now. And I really want to move away from that because I don't think it's helpful.
How do you see despair? Just people saying screw relationships, or what? What's the signs for despair?
Kind of what you're talking about, even just some of the language that you use, everyone's so lonely, everyone's so isolated. And I think people are okay, well, that's the time that I live in, as opposed to, no, you're living in a renaissance right now, which means you have to lean in and not lean out.
Yeah.
And so to answer your first question, I feel a lot of people are talking about the what. Relationships seem harder. People aren't developing friendships as much anymore, but not as many people I think are talking about the how. And I'm all about the how. It's one thing to say like, hey, you should make friendships a priority, or you should like, you know, in your last episode, like encourage your spouse to like have friends. But I think the how is where people are struggling. So it's like everyone's pointing to the problem, but no one's really offering a solution. And then I think the part that is the biggest thing that we should all keep mindful of is that just so much has changed in such a short period of time, you know, between technology, between culture, just the state of the world. And when things change really quickly all at once, like we're just not necessarily wired for that. And you know, people can blame themselves or think that there's someone at fault. And it's just a lot of change at one time.
Right. So when you say Renaissance, I always think of that as a positive word. You know,
I do.
Art got made over. Are you using that positive right now? You're just saying there's a change in relationships. It's not necessarily good, is it?
I think it's one of those things. I think we like that is set to be defined. Like, I think we are the ones living through it, and we're going to be setting the roadmap. And that's why I think relationships are so important right now, is we're going to be setting the blueprint for like what's to come.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when we think about the Renaissance in Italy with Medici, right? Mm-hmm. That family paid for all these thought leaders to come and live in Florence and around the region. So the scientists were around the poets, who were around the artists, who were around the architects, get all these people together and let them kind of rub off on one another, and let's see if we can get to the next level. That was part of the Renaissance. And as I haven't thought about using, Lakshmi, the word Renaissance for the current relational dynamics, but there is similar, like everything is pushing on it, that it's different. Like just to give you an example, I was with, and get your opinion on this, I was with a good friend of mine the other day, and another friend, and came up the movie and book Lonesome Dove. Have you ever seen Lonesome Dove?
I haven't. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's all right. If you want to get depressed, just go ahead and watch it.
Cool. Writing that down now.
Yeah, right. It's a mesmerizing thing. It's a great work of literature, great movie. Actually, I haven't read it. I just saw the movie. It was a multi-part series, but it ends like there's nothing positive at the end. So we were talking about that, and then we were trying to name the guys' names. I said, well, it's Woodrow and Gus. Wait, one was McCall, and we spent about 10 seconds trying to recall it, and we went to reach to our phones to pull it out. What were the names? Because that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
And then we realized, no. Let's not use technology. Let's do this old school and just talk and see if we can remember, right? Mm-hmm. Even the things that were relationship discussions, we'd say, that was the name, because that's all cut out because of technology. We just go there instead of talk to people, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're pointing to like, there's so many like little things that have like died off. One thing is like, you know, putting your head together with somebody and being like, well, what is that? And I write a lot, and I've done a lot of podcast episodes about reminding people of those things that have changed so quickly. Like, for instance, you know, think about it, like 20 years ago, if I had a blender and you were like, hey, that's a really cool blender, I would be like, oh, you can borrow it, or, you know. And now what we do is I would send you the link for it so you can get your own blender.
In like 6 hours it shows up, right?
Right, exactly. And so all these things that we call like the frictionless life that we sort of talk about is so amazing. Well, actually, relationships form in friction.
Yeah.
And we have forgotten that. And that is also like a big part of, you know, the work that I've done, and, you know, like what I'm trying to get people to remember.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I have thought about friction. When you got people bumping up against one another's friction, it's just not possible to have an organization or an HOA or a neighborhood not have a level of friction. That's true. I hadn't thought about the inverse. The positive effect is that we have to have that to have relationships. I like that.
Exactly. And especially like the act of borrowing, which I've written a lot about, has like really declined. I did this whole talk about Tupperware. I'm getting really specific right now, but the reason why I'm getting so specific is I feel like this whole conversation is actually missing specificity, and we're talking in such high platitudes. But you're of the age, you probably remember Tupperware.
Yes.
And what happened is, about 15, 20 years ago, the sort of disposable plastic container started coming out, right? The single use. And that was a great thing. What we forgot was what happened with Tupperware is what I call in my work a boomerang item. It has to come back to you, the person who owns it. Right? And we all used to own boomerang items. And now we only have items that go one way.
So Ziploc baggies have replaced Tupperware that would have to come back to us. We have to have another human connection. They come back.
Correct. And it's such a small thing. And we think about the convenience of it. But when you really break it down, all of these little moments where there used to be sort of like a moment where someone would come back, those don't happen as much anymore. And so you have to, what I advise people is I actually work with people to figure out, I want to find out what your boomerang items are. And I want to make sure you've got 5 of them. And that people know they can borrow them. Like, we have to get that specific and that real, and can't just say you need to make friendships a priority, because nobody knows what to do with that.
Boy, that's really good. You're already pushing me on one of my decisions I've made. What I do at Christmas time is there's a friend of mine who has like the greatest eggnog recipe anybody's ever had. And he gave me the recipe. And now I make for everybody in the neighborhood. Not everybody, a lot of people in my neighborhood, specifically and especially the ones that I haven't had a great relationship with. I'll make, eggnog for them and take and deliver it over Christmas. And it's unbelievable. In fact, if I can remember, I love it. Derek, let's send Lakshmi some eggnog next Christmas.
Okay, we got
I'm
it.
off to figure out some container. That'd be really cool.
We'll do it.
And then they ask me, a couple of them ask me for the recipe. And when they ask me for the recipe, I always give it to them because someone gave me the recipe. So I feel like I can't hoard something that somebody else gave me. But I do think every time, like, man, if I do that, I'm not really needed. And maybe we're not going to have a connection relational point,
Look, I think you did build connection, and I'm not saying you shouldn't share things. I just want you to do that quick pause, which you just did right now, which is great. That's all I want people to do. I'm not telling people not to share promo codes or not to use disposable containers. I just want everyone to just take a minute and be like, is this going to bring connection into my life, or is it going to bring less of it? And I think if we can just get people to, even on those micro moments, I think all of that stuff adds up.
So we've named 2 so far. So this renaissance is affected by technology, answers all of our questions, and we don't have to interact with other people. That's one example. There's no boomerang items where we give things to people, and then there's another connection. That's another one.
Yeah.
What's another one that we may not be thinking of?
Oh, wow. There's, I'm trying to think. I think asking for help. It's so small, but so profound. And I think and that's what I'm saying. Like, I try to be very concrete with people. So, a couple of weeks ago, I couldn't figure out how to hang, a couple of months ago, I couldn't figure out, I was having an issue hanging my curtains. And then another time, like I had fruit that was going to go bad or something. And I made sure to ask my neighbors, and I said, hey, can you help me with this?
Nice.
And so like in those moments, I think right now we think we need to like Google it or outsource the help. And it doesn't have to be big. I think when we call something the loneliness epidemic, I have some concerns about that, because I think that we think that when you call something an epidemic, I think then the solution needs to be highly credentialed people or medication. And I'm not saying that there aren't real reasons for, any of those things. But I think when we realize that loneliness is knowing that we are appreciated and seen in the world, then the solution for that is community, is faith, is church, is favors, is sharing things, is borrowing things. And the answers become a lot more simplified and manageable. Yeah,
you mentioned church. That's a really good one. One of our or my struggles here with my day job, the church I started and pastor, is when we started getting into digital streaming, not just putting out a service digitally, but actually creating infrastructure so people could have connection with people without coming live to the building, or be in cohorts, Zoom cohorts instead of I really wrestled with, is this really good? I mean, it's going to probably drive up our attendance. It's going to help people connect with us when they're on vacation or when they're sick. But this is really going to incentivize people to take the easy way and stay away from a place where there's live, actual human interaction. It's going to really, really hurt that, or at least make it harder. And it has. It's driven people away from human interaction. But they're at home, but they're still engaged. And I feel like it's still the right things we've made, the right decisions we've made holistically. But I remind our folks all the time, like, we have to give people reasons to come and be with us physically. We can't just think that, it's part of their spiritual discipline, they'll show up. No, they won't. They won't. That's a previous era. What are we doing to incentivize people to come and bless them and give them actual live human interaction? It's a big decision point.
It is. And again, the fact that you're even thinking about it is so important, because I think for so many people, it's been a reflex, and people get so excited about convenience.
Yes.
We're very driven by convenience, by things that are consumer, that I think sometimes we think that we're slowing things down by asking people to come in person, or we're excluding people. And there's always going to be drawbacks. And all I ask people to do is, I just want you to stop and do whatever you do consciously. That's it.
What other things do you think we should, and I don't want to disincentivize people from listening to your podcast, reading your books. It's all great stuff. But what other things should we give pause about that we just make natural today? What are our decisions or other patterns where we should at least have a head tilt and go, maybe I should go old school on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even like the idea of calling it old school, like sometimes I think it's like analog, or just slowing things down, or I want to be thoughtful about that for a second. So I want to think about it. But in terms of I think if this would be a great place to maybe shift specifically to dating, because that is my wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's where I want to go next. Yes.
Okay.
By the way, are you dating right now? Are you married? What is your status?
What am I? This is very interesting that you ask. My partner and I just split up last week.
Oh, okay. You seem like you're pretty happy about it, so it must have been your decision instead of theirs.
No, why do you think that?
Because you're carrying yourself with a level of lightness. If you'd split up that recently, I would have thought that you'd be having more of the signs of, depression or sadness. You don't seem remotely sad to me.
Well, that's a really interesting thing to talk about, because I guess I don't see it that way. I see it as this really amazing person was in my life for a while, and now he's not. I'm genuinely, and I mean this, I think you can see it in my face, I'm just genuinely grateful that I met this person.
Wow. Who are you? Are you freaking kidding me? That's one of the most profound things I've heard in a long time. You're looking holistic. Let me tell you why. Or those of you who aren't connecting the dots. Everybody we talk to has always got a woe is me story. Life, the glass is half empty. Life is hard. And here you're able to ladder up, helicopter up, whatever you want to do, look at the holistic picture and say, hey, no matter how I feel right now, the truth is I had a lot of blessings in this relationship for a long time. And I'm choosing to think about that. That is revolutionary.
No, look, I genuinely mean that. And I think that's part of what's going on in our dating culture is what I just told you is what so many people fear. But if you're not willing to open yourself up to that, then you don't get to have all the other stuff that comes with that. Yes. And what I'm seeing with a lot of people that, are dating, and I'm not saying that people have to date necessarily, but is just this absolute zero tolerance for disappointment and, heartbreak in some cases, or just things not working out exactly how you want them to. And so that's just like something that's really important to me is I want people to think about dating as like this much bigger way of interacting with the world and not just, does this person become my forever partner or not? It's just so much, it's so much bigger than that.
All right. So if I could use stereotypes for a moment.
Sure.
That are unhelpful, but maybe insightful here. Are you saying that I hate using inflammatory language, but are you saying that the snowflake generation that is supposed to not be able to handle disappointment and difficulty is less likely to date because it's a 50-50 shot it's going to end in difficulty because someone's going to break up, and so therefore let's just not getting to something that could be difficult because I don't like difficulty. Is that what you're getting at?
Not necessarily. I'm talking. I'm sure that can be true for some people. I think there's a bunch of things going on with all of these things. There's like these multiple factors. Yes, I think one thing. I think people have become less comfortable with disappointment. I think that is going on. I think there's another thing going on that I think gets overlooked sometimes is that, again, all of these things can be happening at once. I listened to a couple of your podcasts this weekend, and I know that as given your place in the world and the role that you play in a lot of people's lives, like you're very concerned about marriage and the decline in marriage and things like that. And I wanted to tell you this because I do research all day long with people who've been married, not married, dating, didn't get married. And there's a lot of different things going on. But one of the things that's going on is that one of the reasons people aren't getting married is not because they don't want to get married. It's actually because they have such respect for marriage. Right? Like they see it as such an important institution, such a moment of, a sacred thing that they don't want to enter into something sacred if they're not completely ready for it or feeling it. And so I just think it's another way to understand the marital trends. I don't think it's always that people don't want to get married. Sometimes it's because they hold marriage in such high regard.
Right. Oh, okay. And so that relates to what with your disappointment point, which I think is a good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, it relates kind of like that there's a lot of different things that I think people need to be equipped with in order to date. And I think with modern dating, it's changed a lot, right? I'm sure. I know you've been married, but you've talked to people. The degree to which dating culture has changed in the past 15 years is breathtaking. And I don't think people are aware of how much changed, how quickly. And so sometimes I just like to give people a little bit of a primer. So there's a lot of different ways we could look at it. So
like, let's imagine my wife, she had a massive stroke a few years ago and she was miraculously spared and she's 100% right now, which is crazy. Like she couldn't move. She couldn't talk. It was a doctors have said it's a miracle, but let's just say she was one of the many who just died. And now Brian Tome is out dating. How would dating now be different than what I remember it as in 1987?
Well, that's a great question. So actually, I'm going to start that by asking you, what would you do?
What would I do if I was going to start dating?
Yeah, how would you go about it?
Oh, gosh. Oh, I'm probably deviant to the mean, Lakshmi, because I know just a lot of people. And a lot of people know a lot of people. I'd probably have people trying to set me up left and right. I'm probably a little different than that.
Yeah. Would you want that?
Absolutely. I would take that. I wouldn't take everybody up on their suggestion, but I would love it if it was a little bit easier. If someone who I knew came to me and said, here you go. In fact, I would view a dating relationship like a job interview. I wouldn't go out on a date until I had somebody who I respected, knew her or knew the data, did some vetting, and then I'd go out and hang with them. I would make that part of my communal experience. I want to lean into trusted advisors.
Yeah. And that would be like your approach. But like, the process of getting to know someone at this point would be different.
Right.
You'd probably, the last time you dated, your probably your imprint, your internal imprint might be different than maybe what it was when it was 20. It might be the same. I don't know, but you'd have to
What's that mean? Internal imprint?
So the idea of like what you think a partner should be for you, or the role.
Oh, absolutely be different. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So like all of that would have to be like updated. And that's part of like what I'm doing with like, my podcast and the later dater. And I call it the later dater today because dating today is different than what it was, even 20 or 30 years ago. But so I think I mentioned like a lot of people just don't understand sometimes like what happened with dating culture. The biggest thing that I think people forget is that, so I know this is not the most familiar territory for you, but for a long, there were online dating sites and that happened. The biggest shift that happened, and not everyone, like they're aware of it, but they don't understand the implications of it, was the arrival of the dating apps, specifically Tinder. And that happened in 2012. And that did something just that is just massive, right? So all of a sudden, dating went from being on your computer to being on your phone, right? And so that was a very different experience. And so people started to make very, very quick decisions. And the biggest thing that it did was prior to Tinder, most people on online dating sites were usually about in their 30s, like early 30s. And then all of a sudden you had this massive swath of people, of younger people coming in. And so that just changed everything. And the biggest thing that I think has happened is before people got online, they had a lot of in-person relationships. Now people are going online and they haven't had a lot of the in-person experience. And that to me is the thing that people forget. And I think that's part of, one of the reasons why a lot of young people are rejecting dating apps.
Oh, they are rejecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I heard you talking before about dynamics are different that I never even considered, and that is it's now taboo to date somebody in your office, and that was a big pull, right? That's how you got to know somebody. That's maybe how you got to be attracted to somebody that you wouldn't be attracted just with a screenshot on Tinder.
Yeah, no, I think it's massive. And it's the idea that was where I first started my work. I was like tracking, couples that had met in the workplace. And so many of the couples that I talked to, they would say like, well, I wasn't necessarily attracted to that person first. Right. And it kind of was a slow build. And to me, the most important part of the thing that you're pointing out was the slow build. Right. It wasn't always immediate. A lot of times it was like, oh, like I saw so-and-so and, one day I was just like, oh, why is he changing the paper in the copy machine? And then like 3 weeks later, like, oh, I can't wait until he shows up to change the paper in the copy machine.
Right. Maybe he's my soulmate.
Yeah. And so I loved uncovering those stories and they were so sweet. And I think to me, the biggest thing was just sort of the slow progression of people's feelings. And I think what a lot of what dating culture is about right now is it doesn't really allow for that slow build. Is you're supposed to make a decision so quickly. And that's actually not how a lot of people are wired.
Taking care of your health isn't always easy, but it should be at least simple. That's why for the last 2 years, I've been drinking AG1 every day, no exceptions, at home, on a hunting trip, camping off my motorcycle, no exceptions. It's just one scoop mixed in water once a day, every day, and it makes me feel ready to get moving. That's because each serving of AG1 delivers my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre- and probiotics, and more. It's a powerful, healthy habit that's also powerfully simple. I like to have it in the morning. I have a 12 ounce of water, so right off the bat, I'm helping my hydration every single morning. This is the one product, if I had to recommend one, I'd recommend this one to elevate your health. It's AG1, and that's why I partner with them for 2 years. So if you want to take ownership of your health, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/aggressivelife. That's drinkag1.com/aggressivelife. Get yourself some. I just got a new grill/smoker, and out of all the meat I'm cooking up, there's something that hits the spot like no other. A real American cheeseburger. And when I got to buy burger, man, I want Flying K Ranch. Located in Findlay, Ohio, Flying K Ranch raises their beef the natural way. No hormones or antibiotics, just happy cows eating grass all day. Flying K is a family business that ships all over America and partners with state and national certification boards to make sure cattle and customers are happy. Learn more and place your orders at flyingkranchangus.com. That's flyingkranchangus.com. Time to eat and time to get back to the show. Gosh, I'm trying to figure out what is okay for me to reveal here. This could be really icky.
Well,
this could be.
You do have a delete button, right? Or
well, we do, and Dirt can.
I can.
Dirt can. Okay, so I'll just process here with a safe place, and then we'll figure out what it is later. Right. But it's to your point, as I think about it, I bet. If you took a look at all the my cohort, I even hate to say this phrase because it's so triggering to me. But if you looked at all the mega church pastors who fell sexually, I would hazard a guess it was with a person who they were not initially attracted to. It was with a person who they got an emotional bond to over time and wouldn't have cleared their initial attractiveness filters. Mm-hmm. But they got, bonded to him because they were spending time with him. Yeah.
And I mean, I think yes. And that's your role, but it's definitely not exclusive to pastors. Yes. It's a lot of people. I worked in restaurants and bars for a long time, and that just being in the same space with people and kind of seeing, I think the most important thing that people can take away from this is that when you see multiple dimensions of someone, and you're not just at a restaurant or a coffee shop and you're just like looking straight at them and have to make a decision, when you see multiple dimensions and there's not pressure to make a decision, that's when you let your guard down. That's when you're open. And that's when you get to, really have space to develop feelings. And that is, again, just like the Tupperware, that's one of those things that we just don't allow for anymore.
Right. So I could very easily take the conservative route here, and I could say, let's direct our conversation to how we keep from having inappropriate relationships in the workplace. But that's the old storyline. There's an important place for that. Let's shelve that for some other day. Let's get back to your core passion of, well, how do we have connection inside the workplace? Even if it's not dating, romantic connection, there's still need for relational connection. What's your thoughts for us there?
Well, one is, I think you read in my bio, like I had the job, like my job was to help people make relationships at work. And I think that job should exist. And I think that every big company should have someone like me, whose job is to help people build relationships, both inside the workplace and outside the workplace. I would love to see that become a job. In terms of helping people, I think people really need to make the most of their time with humans. Like when you are in the workplace, I think that time should, be special. It doesn't mean you have to talk to everybody, but I think sharing space, physical space with people is so special and so sacred. And I think we take it for granted. And then the other thing I would say, especially like what I was saying before, if you're going to work with other people, learn from them, genuinely, learn from them. Whether you're in a restaurant and if you don't know how to do something or you're trying to figure something out, lean on your fellow humans as much as possible.
Yeah, it's another one of the things that's hurt us is technology. Is I can just go to YouTube University, which is great, and it'll tell me how to do anything. Where in the old days, you have to find somebody who knew how to fix a toilet, have them come over to your house. You have to find somebody who knew how to do body work and have them come over and spend the afternoon with you. Now we can do it all on YouTube, which is wonderful. I use it all the time. But there's yet another added dimension of how this is making relationships not that simple anymore.
Totally. And it's so funny. When I was at WeWork, I was actively doing all this stuff. I had a program one time where I took like 15 employees and they had to come up with something that they didn't know how to do. Like they had to list something and they had 2 weeks to learn it and they couldn't use the internet. Only try and learn it from another person. And so they got so creative. And it was everything from, the stories were incredible, Brian. Everything from like, someone was like, I've always wanted to know how to tie a fly fishing knot, to like, I've always wanted, this one guy, he didn't know how to braid his daughter's hair. And it was a very like, I feel like I should. And I think my wife would really appreciate that, but I don't know really how to do it. So you're like learning about people too. And it was one of the most beautiful, simple, didn't cost a penny. And it reverberated throughout the workplace. And again, these things don't cost money, but you do need someone to take the time and to explain to people and to make it important.
And this was an organizational requirement that everybody had to do.
No, it was not an organizational requirement. It was, I was constantly like, look, my job was like to study and promote workplace relationships. So I was just trying stuff all the time. And this was one of those things that I tried that just like could not have gone better.
How did you get into this initially?
Which part? Just the human relationships part?
Yeah, being intrigued by human relationships and leads you down a path of being a guru here. Other people want to talk to you. What were the initial seedlings? Honestly,
like having a really hard time connecting with people. I went to college and I wouldn't say I was shy. I would say I was awkward. I think that's a better way. Like I was just awkward and I just didn't know how to talk to people. And that, as you can imagine, that led to me feeling very isolated and very depressed. And so I dropped out of college. And which was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was the first time. This is why, like, I really understand this part that people feel. The first time, I was 20 years old and I left my cohort, right? I left my pack. I left the tribe. This is what everybody else was doing, and I left. And I was like, I'm going to emotionally think about it. Like I was like, I failed. I didn't do this. I have no friends. And so I got a job bartending. And I was like, if I'm going to get over this, there's no better job than bartending. So
get guys drunk, get them start hitting on me.
It wasn't that, Brian. It was not that.
I'm having fun. I'm getting to trust you. You can see my true sense of humor here, which is very boyish. So good. Thank you.
No, but it's not. No, it's fine. Like that wasn't what it was about. Here was a job where like you're constantly interacting with people and you have to find the interaction interesting because you'll go bonkers if you're just having mindless conversations all day.
Right.
And so there was this guy that trained me as a bartender and he was like, I still think he's one of the most important influences in my life. Like he might as well have been a pastor. He had this way about him at the bar. He could just hold court. And he made everyone feel like they were paid attention to. He knew how to exit and enter conversations like seamlessly. And he was an okay bartender. I was probably actually a better bartender than him, but he knew how to hold a conversation. And I remember watching him and I was like, that's the kind of bartender I want to be. And I just started noticing that it was always these small things that could change the course of a conversation, these small things that could make it going from meeting to connecting. And then when I went back to college, I was a changed person. I'd been a bartender for 2.5, 3 years, and I was this different person. And I realized, and then I just saw that everybody else was struggling with a form of what I was struggling with, but they called it isolation, or it was being pathologized. And I was like, no, I just don't think we've all learned this skill. I don't think anything's wrong with us. I think we just haven't deeply, deeply studied and practiced what it means to converse, hang out, shoot the shit, have a serious conversation, get someone to tell a story. These are all micro skills, and we've never really, really been taught. We think we're supposed to know them by virtue of being a human, but we don't. And so I just kept sort of, cultivating that skill and wanting to figure out, how can I bring it out into the world? And then that naturally led me to dating, because that was the place where it was all falling apart.
Was this bartender unconsciously conscious? Like he had systems that he knew how to do and he could teach you those things? Or was he just a quote unquote natural, and then you picked apart what he did and replicated it yourself?
That's such a good question. I never asked him that. I know where he lives. I could probably track him down. I have a very good sense of what he believed. And what he believed was that, and you probably feel this way too, I think he believed that if you have people's attention in a physical space, that is an honor. And I'm going to make anyone who sits at my bar feel like it was worth their time and worth their money, and worth their energy. And so if I were to get into his head, I think he thought like, everyone here could be somewhere else and they're choosing to be at my bar, and I'm going to make sure that I honor that.
Yeah. It really is a gift when someone chooses to give you their time and their attention. I don't think we exalt that as highly as we should.
Yeah. And I try to, I guess if I were to think about today, like anytime I'm talking to someone or anytime I'm interacting with my neighbors or my barista, I just try to pretend like they're at my bar.
Talk about story setting. I like that phrase, and how you try to incorporate stories into relational connection.
Yeah. So this is like one of the things that I teach, and it's one of the things I believe really strongly in. I feel like we've over-indexed on storytelling. I like storytelling, not against it. But storytelling is very much about like, here's my story. I want you to hear my story. Story setting is, how do I hear your story? So it's everything from like asking questions to like realizing maybe how someone communicates. Like, how do they need to say their story? Is it going to take them, it's going to be an immediate thing? Is it going to be like is it going to be a little bit of time? Is it going to be a couple of weeks? Like, what's going to make them feel like they're ready to share their story? And then how can I make every moment with that person or with that interaction the potential for a story?
I like that story setting. You're right. We tend to be pretty self-focused, which is about me and my story and my communication skills. We don't really spend any time at all about how to be a great listener and understand what other people are saying.
Yeah, and it's even more than being a great listener. So like when I say like something like I didn't know how to put up or I was having difficulty putting up the drapes, and I asked my neighbor. That to me is a product of story setting, because now we're going to have a story together, right? I'm opening up the door for me to have a story with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely does. That's important.
So it's not always a verbal thing. Sometimes it's a physical thing, but it's understanding that we're all living in this big story, and it's not just about your story. You're also trying to help other people build their stories.
Yeah, you're about other folks and giving them the opportunity to engage instead of just meeting your personal loneliness needs.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I think that we are, all of us are. I mean, the most important person in my world is me. I wish it wasn't the case, but it is. And at least that's my tendency. And we don't spend that much time thinking about how to be others focused. how to talk to somebody, how to interact with somebody, how to build something, other people up. And maybe that's the reason why we're lonely. We don't spend time on that. So you're an expert in this. You're I guess you could also say you're a pro. It's part of your livelihood is tied into this. So a lot of us are lonely. We don't know what to do about it. Mm-hmm. Coach us, please. You have been, but what else? What else would you say?
Okay. The first thing that I would say is I would want you, Brian, or Dirt, because he's listening, is I want you to spend some time really thinking about how you connect, right? I think we have this idea that connection is found in physical proximity with people or in conversation, and that's not how everybody connects, right?
Yes.
That's my first thing. I think we're talking about it incorrectly. I think everyone's like, oh, it's an icebreaker, or oh, just like go to a party. That's not how everyone connects. That's not how everybody experiences connection. If connection is like how you feel seen, like how you feel part of something, like you can feel so connected, like standing in front of the ocean, right? You can really feel like you're a part of something. And, you know, there's like this majestic element to the world. You can feel really connected when you're cleaning. You can feel really connected when you bake bread. And so I always remind people, it's not about being with other people. It's about reminding yourself like of how you feel connected to the world. And that doesn't always rely on other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it completely does.
Yeah. I guess the reason why, sorry if that was a weird thing to ask, it's just that I'm a little bit concerned about this idea of like everyone talking about connection. Like I have to have friends and I have to go to this party and I have to be out. I think that idea is making people lonelier.
Interesting. So you're saying we should just accept where we are right now, not be stressed out about it, and just learn better skills for connection? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I think we need to take a beat and ask people, yes, we know that humans are tribal and that humans need to be together, but I want to understand how you connect. How do you feel connection? Because that's where you should be focused. Like you felt connection making that eggnog.
Yes.
You, I'm sure, feel connection hosting this podcast every week.
I do.
You feel connection, being a man of faith and having man camp and having couples camp and feeling like you're putting something out into the world, right? This is my assessment of you.
Yes.
That may or may not be how someone else experiences connection. Someone else experiences connection by listening to you, right? Or zooming into one of your talks. And so I just want people to be very, very aware of how they experience connection, not how they're being told to experience connection.
Yeah. I like it. No, I like that. Right. So there's not a set paradigm to-do list for people. I like how you're just another voice that's raising the water level on this discussion and pointing to a land that people need to be moving towards, whatever vessel they use.
Yes, exactly. And I think, could we have more, dinners and more Tupperware and all that? Yes, we can. I absolutely think we can. But I think that the piece that people like when I do this exercise with people, like honestly, my neighbor, he works at a bank, and I said, I'm sorry, do you mind like helping with something? He literally said to me, he's like, Lakshmi, I look at a screen all day long. Like, I love doing this stuff.
That's good. Well, Lakshmi, I think that you are the kind of person who can handle something we give to very few guests, because very few guests can do it, but I believe you can do it. Do you know what we're talking about right now?
I think I do.
We're talking about the lightning round. Yes. I get a gauge for every guest and go, I don't think that personality type goes with it. But you have the right stuff. So here's what we do. I'm going to ask you a question, and you got to answer it back in like lightning fashion, 1-2 sentence answers. Are you up for the lightning round?
Brian, I'm ready.
You're so measured, even in your discussion, even your response. I like it. Okay, here we go. An easy gimme here. What's the biggest aggressive move you're making in your life right now?
There's like two, and one feels a little personal right now, and the other one.
Oh, come on. Personal.
I'm moving back home to help care for my dad.
That is aggressive. Yeah. Okay. What makes for a great first date?
Like genuinely like stopping before you meet that person and really remembering that this moment has never happened before. You've never met this person before. This person is unique. This person has a life story that you don't know. And just taking a minute to think about how freaking cool that is.
Yeah. Boy, that's really sorry, we're going to depart from the rules for a moment, which regularly happens with people who follow the rules because they're so interesting and I want to talk about it more. You're really interesting that is that's another paradigm shift. I'm thinking back to the days when I would date as a youngster, and I'm going into those dates hoping I discover somebody who checks off all the boxes for me and why I should have another date with them, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't going into those dates going, hey, this is a unique creature who's got a unique story. It'd be kind of cool to learn about this person.
Yeah, like, look, I'm not saying it's easy and I'm not trying to like be Pollyanna-ish about it, but it is true. Like, it's pretty cool to meet another person. And your married friends don't get to do that. Just reminder, they don't get to do that in the same way. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. Great. All right. Once they're dating, after that first date, what's the best advice while you're in the midst of a dating relationship?
Wait, you're in a relationship or you're like going towards the second date? Like what?
Yeah, you're date 3-4.
Date 3-4.
What might I be thinking about? Or what should be the right attitudinal mindset?
The right attitudinal mindset at that point. I think that is the point where stuff tends to fall apart. And it's not because of anything other than just sort of like modern tech and modern, like that's where like wires can get crossed, like the wrong emoji is sent, the tone of the text was off. Someone said they could meet on Thursday and now they can only meet on Friday. The conversation can kind of start to dip. And so I think those are the moments where you really have to think about like your connection skills and genuinely not reacting and really like talking through so that you don't cross wires. Just remember that's the crossed wires like zone of dating.
Number one skill we need to apply in order to feel more generally connected.
Appreciation for others, not just gratitude. To me, gratitude is like, I'm grateful. Appreciation takes you a step further and it like, you're actually taking a minute to understand what that person contributed. Good.
All right. And last one, the lightning round. Best podcasting advice you have for me. You're a pro. Give me something.
Best podcasting advice?
Yeah. Give me a little communal connection feedback here. What can I do to serve people like you a little bit better?
Honestly, like I think you're doing, I mean this, like I like that you spent as much time with me as you did. I think I talk about something that a lot of people don't necessarily, I think they want to talk about it in broad strokes. I don't think they want to get into the nitty gritty. And I think I've heard on your episodes, like I think you're ready and willing to get into the details, which I think is what we need. So I would just say with all of your guests, like people who have thought a lot about these topics, let them get into the details and not just, just talk about it like in headlines. Yeah. I think you do a great job of that.
Thank you. Well, I want to not be remiss and limit your potency to the questions I ask. So is there, as we come down the final lap here, is there anything you wish I would have asked you? Is there anything you want to talk about that I didn't give you a layup for?
I guess just like I'm the host of the Later Dater Today podcast, and I study and research people dating in between the ages of 45 and 59. And I guess, do you want to know what's the most interesting things about them, or?
Yes, I do. Because I'm not ready to date because I'm happily married, but I am 58. So if something happens to my wife, I may still have to listen to your podcast for tips for myself.
Yeah, I mean, it is just about human connection in general. It's not just about dating. I believe dating is just the skill of getting to know other people. So it doesn't matter
I like that.
how old you are.
The skill hold on, sorry. That's revolutionary right there. Dating is just the skill of getting to know other people. I thought dating was the skill of getting other people to make you feel good without the commitment of marriage. That's great. I love it.
I'm glad you cleared that up for yourself.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm taking notes on you right now. Go ahead. Keep going.
I guess I've had many, I've been in and out of this world for 15 years, and this is just absolutely one of the most fascinating chapters in, my work in the dating world. Yeah. I have a lot of, just hope and understanding for people that are dating in this age group. And I think if there's anything that I wanted to maybe that I think would be important is most of the dating guidance that you hear out there is written for the 20 or 30 something. And then it jumps to what I call the golden dater, which is sort of late 60s, 70s. And people kind of skip over what I call the later dater, this group in the middle. That is, and especially right now, this 45 to 59-year-old, I think they're so fascinating because they were formed by the pre-internet era, but they're very much comfortable on the internet. And I think that in some ways, this might be the group that we should look to for how we should develop and think about dating culture.
So how does a later dater do things differently than that earlier dater? What should they/we keep our mindset on?
Well, they tend to have, there's sometimes different priorities, right? It's not necessarily marriage. For some people it is, but I think for a lot of people, there's just a clearing and what do I want from dating right now? I think they're actually not necessarily that different, but they do tend to be a little bit more able to hang in the awkward conversation, to kind of give things a chance, to just sort of press the pause button a little bit. Those are some of the distinguishing factors, I think, of a later dater. And yeah, I saw in your discussion, what can Gen Z learn from? And I do interview a lot of Gen Z people because I want to understand dating culture across the board. And they're fascinated with this Gen X dater. Not that they want to be lectured, but they're very fascinated with people that were sort of shaped before the internet, because I think they missed out on that. And are very, very curious about what it was like to, grow up without the internet.
Is it that we were shaped before the internet that makes our answers somewhat interesting, or is it just that we've got mileage under our tires and so we've grown a bit more wise?
It's probably a combination of both, but I think that just not having things as easily accessible, having to cultivate, even if you were an introvert, you kind of had to cultivate some kind of in-person personality, or, you had to be at a party and you couldn't just look at your phone. And I think that you are shaped by that. You are very much shaped by that. And I think that is something that I think Gen Z is just genuinely curious about.
Well, yeah, I remember when it was, you needed to have relational connection because there was going to come a day when you were going to need a ride to the airport. And you couldn't get a taxi. Taxis weren't coming to the suburbs. You had to know people or have neighbors who would drive you to the airport, and then you would do the same for them. I remember my parents dealing with that. It wasn't just do Uber, which is wonderful. I use it all the time, but there's just so many examples of relational connection opportunities that are just gone, or at least we've got to work hard to get into a different paradigm.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Even like I even like breaking a 20. Like no one does that anymore, right?
Yeah.
Right. Even something as small as that, we don't do as much anymore. And so there's all these like tiny little things, and you add them all up, and you can see why people don't interact with people anymore.
Well, Lakshmi, this has been fascinating and fantastic. Thanks for being such a life-giving, encouraging, and insightful guest. That's exactly what you have been. And friends, look, this woman dropped some truth bombs. I'll tell you a couple of them for me. Like a zero tolerance for disappointment. I wrote that one down. Thought, man, where am I? Am I weak on that? Afraid of that? This last one, the skill of getting to know other people. There is just a bunch of things that she dropped on us that are countercultural ideas that we ought to really consider and use, because guess what? The way of culture, it's not working. It's not working. The tide is flowing the wrong way. Social indicators are not well. And if we want to be better, we're going to have to do something different. If you want the same thing you always done, keep doing the same thing you always done. If you don't, you got to do something different. And Lakshmi Rengarajan gave us some amazing things to think on and work through. So let's not just have good thoughts. Let's do good things. That's why it's called the aggressive life. Lakshmi, anything else you want to say to us? Give us an ad for yourself. Where do we find you, your stuff, your podcast? We don't want to miss it.
Sure. My podcast is called The Later Dater Today, and it's available on all the platforms. And then thelaterdatertoday.com is my website. And on there, I'm always doing research. I'm constantly interviewing people about their dating lives and trying to learn what's happening out there. And then, on socials, Later Dater Today. But that's the easiest way to find me. And
so now that you are available, someone might want to reach out to you and connect with you.
You know what? I would not be opposed to that.
That's one thing we haven't had there yet. We haven't had anybody who's found the one through the podcast.
No, we haven't, but
we haven't.
Maybe it's time.
Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great. This is really good. I hope that your stuff just gets as much play and as big as possible, because you've been really helpful. Thanks for being generous, coming on this, this little ho-hum podcast relative to the heavy hitters who have you. It's been really great getting to know you.
It's been so great, Brian. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Dirt.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
Dirt, look at that. That's how she connects. No one ever thanks
Very
you. Look how she just connected with you and thanked you.
I feel so good now.
You do. You should feel so good. That's great. All right. Hey, we'll see you next time on The Aggressive Life. Thanks for joining us on this journey toward aggressive living. Find more resources, articles, past episodes, and live events over at briantome.com. My new books, a repackaged edition of The 5 Marks of a Man and a brand new 5 Marks of a Man tactical guide are open right now on Amazon. If you haven't yet, leave this podcast a rating and review. It really helps get the show in front of new listeners. And if you want to connect, find me on Instagram at Brian Tome. The Aggressive Life is a production of Crossroads Church, Cincinnati, Ohio.